This story goes back nearly 700 years, as you can see, to August 1330, when King Robert I's heart was taken into battle. Nowadays, he's probably better known as Robert the Bruce. My name is Stuart Noble. I am a full Blue Badge member of the Scottish Tourist Guides Association, and I'm here today to tell you this most amazing story. But it actually starts about 16 years earlier. At that time, Robert the Bruce won the Battle of Bannockburn, just near Stirling, and this was the start of Scotland regaining its independence from England. And here you can see the statue of Robert the Bruce at Bannockburn. However, the English didn't instantly give in, and it was another 14 years before a peace treaty with England was signed. And King Robert the Bruce, by that time, perhaps had an indication that he was dying. The probable cause nowadays is thought to be leprosy. And so he decided to make preparations as to what should happen with his body once he died. And his death took place the following year. And what we are concerned with here is what happened to his heart. He'd always wanted to visit Jerusalem, and in particular, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And he'd never been able to do it in his lifetime. He'd been too busy fighting off the English and regaining Scotland's independence. However, he got hold of one of his best friends, a colleague in arms, Sir James Douglas. He's known in Scotland as well as Good Sir James, but the English didn't look on him with quite so much affection, and they referred to him as the Black Douglas. So Robert the Bruce instructed Sir James Douglas to take his heart out of his body and put it into a casket and take it to Jerusalem. And here you can see a photo of Sir James Douglas's tomb. More about that later. So Sir James headed off towards Europe, and at that time in Europe, King Alfonso XI of Castile and Spain was determined to drive out the Moors from Spain. At that time, the Moors owned a lot of the province of Andalusia in the south of Spain, and their headquarters were in the magnificent Alhambra in Granada. It was both a fortress and a palace. The Moors also held El Castillo de la Estrella at Teba in Andalusia, and I must apologize if my Spanish accent is not quite what it should be. The castle stands on a hill above the little town of Teba, and you can look down in the town from the castle itself. And on the 25th of August, let battle commence, the battle for Teba against the Moors. And this medieval picture gives an idea of what the battle may have been like. During the course of the battle, Sir James Douglas ran ahead of his colleagues and found himself surrounded. And the story goes that he shouted words like, "Lead on, brave heart, I'll follow thee." And what he did was he threw the casket with Robert the Bruce's heart in it at the Moors who were surrounding him. And the words are those that appear in a poem which was written not that long after by John Barber, called The Bruce. However, the Battle of Teba was inconclusive, and the Moors killed Sir James Douglas. And when my wife and I visited Teba, we were standing up here looking out over the surrounding landscape when a flock of large birds came past, perhaps a dozen of them. I'm not quite sure what they might have been, but there are vultures in that part of Spain. And might these birds have been descendants of vultures that feasted on the bodies of the people who died at the Battle of Teba? Down below in Teba itself, there is a monument to Robert the Bruce and Sir James Douglas in one of the main squares in the town. As you can see, on one side it is written in English, while on the other side it is in Spanish. Well, what happens next? What happens after the battle? Bruce's heart was brought back to Scotland and buried here in Melrose Abbey in the Borders. This had always been a particular favourite of his. His heart was buried, but the burial place was not marked. And then in 1921, a heart in a casket was found and buried again, unmarked again. But then in 1996, Bruce's heart was found for a second time. And this time, the burial spot was marked with this commemorative stone that you can see. And inscribed round the stone are the words, "A noble heart may have nae ease, if freedom fail." And this again comes from Barber's poem, The Bruce. Robert the Bruce's heart was not the only item which was returned to Scotland after the Battle of Teba. Sir James Douglas's body was also brought back to Scotland, to this church, St. Bride's Church, in the little village of Douglas in Lanarkshire. And here is his tomb inside the church. And you can perhaps see there's a little white card on it. And what it is marking is the fact that on his body is a little posy of flowers brought back from Teba.
Well, you have heard the amazing story of what happened to King Robert the Bruce's heart, and you may wonder what happened to the rest of his body. But, as they say, that's another story and not for today.